Welcome to the deep dive. We're looking at some really interesting ideas today.
Yeah, these come from an excerpt in 101 essays that will change the way you think.
Specifically, the chapter on the psychology of getting unstuck and the 3 stages of making habits autonomous.
And it's fascinating because it really pushes back on something we often take for granted.
Which is?
Well, this idea that success, especially in something tricky or creative, is mostly about raw talent.
Yeah.
Something you're just born with.
Right, the innate skill idea.
Exactly. And this source suggests maybe the real secret is, well, something else entirely, something maybe more controllable.
Okay, so that's our mission for this deep dive then.
Yeah.
Let's unpack that. What does this source claim is actually more vital than just skill?
And how does that tie into things like self-control?
Yeah, and how do we, actually improve? What's the psychology behind getting better at stuff?
And maybe most importantly, what does it all mean when we hit that point where we feel completely stuck?
That feeling of hitting a wall, yeah.
So if you've ever felt that, working away at something but just not seeing the results you expect, this should offer a different way to look at it.
Hopefully some real understanding, not just theory.
Let's hope so.
Okay, so let's get into the core idea the source puts forward first. It says success isn't so much about skill, but more about habit.
Right. The real difference maker for people who get really good at something isn't just can they do it well, it's that they're prolific. They do it well consistently.
Like the example you mentioned earlier, writing.
Exactly. Loads of people can probably string together a good paragraph, maybe even a decent article once in a while.
Sure.
But doing it well day after day, that's different. That consistency, that sheer volume the source talks about.
Yeah.
That's what seems to build real mastery over time.
And building that kind of consistency, well, that takes self-control, doesn't it? Which feels, unreliable sometimes.
It does. And the source makes a really crucial point here. Natural talent, maybe that's innate, but self-control, that's presented as something you develop, like training a muscle.
Okay, so it pushes back on the idea that if you're talented, the discipline just comes naturally?
Yeah, exactly. It argues against that. And it brings up this psychological concept that our self-control, our ability to resist urges, to focus, it's actually limited each day.
It's like a battery that runs down.
Sort of, yeah. It's not an endless supply you can just keep drawing on. You use it up.
But crucially, the text also says you can increase that capacity, right, with practice.
Yes, absolutely. It can be extended over time.
Yeah.
And this is where, according to the source, really effective people get smart about managing it.
How so?
Well, knowing it's limited, they become strategic. They cut down on unnecessary decisions. They get rid of distractions really ruthlessly sometimes. They minimize anything that isn't core to what they need to do.
And then they apply that limited focus self-control to that main thing.
Precisely. And the idea is, by doing that over and over, building that routine, removing the friction,
then the task itself starts demanding less of that conscious effort, less of that self-control battery. It becomes
second nature, as the source puts it.
Right.
And this leads nicely into a psychological model the source mentions.
Right.
From back in the 60s, I think.
Yeah, about how we actually acquire skills. It outlines 3 specific stages.
What's the first one?
It's called the cognitive stage. This is like square one, beginner level.
Okay.
You're consciously thinking through every little action. It takes intense focus. You're sort of intellectualizing it, making tons of mistakes.
And actively trying out different ways to do it better. You're very aware you're doing the thing.
Very aware. Then you move into the associative stage.
Okay, stage 2. So here, it still takes effort, definitely, but maybe not quite as much brain power as stage 1.
Right. You've worked out some of the basic kinks. Parts of it might feel a bit smoother. Maybe some muscle memory starts to build.
But you're still making mistakes. It's not automatic yet.
Not at all. You're still aware of the process, just maybe not every tiny detail like before.
Got it. And the final stage?
That's the autonomous stage. This is the goal, I guess.
The autopilot stage.
Exactly. Or like being in a flow state. You can kind of release conscious focus on the mechanics.
Your brain's sort of done the programming already through practice.
Yeah, your deep understanding takes over. It lets you perform smoothly, efficiently, almost without thinking about the how.
And significantly, your limited self-control isn't being drained by the basics anymore. It's freed up.
Okay, so that's the ideal progression. But,
and this is a huge but, in the source, there's a critical point, often somewhere between that associative and autonomous stage where things get really tough.
the plateau.
The plateau, yeah. And it's where a lot of people seem to stumble.
And the source describes the feeling really well. It's like You're doing it, you're putting in the time, maybe even people are saying you're doing okay.
Mm.
But your standard, your internal benchmark, what you want it to be like your taste, is suddenly miles ahead of your actual current performance.
Ah, yes. This is where the source brings in that idea from Ira Glass.
The creative gap.
That's the one. He talks about how when you start out, your work, well, it's just not that good yet.
You've all been there.
Absolutely. But your taste, the thing that drew you to it in the first place, your taste is often killer, as he puts it.
So there's this huge gap between your ambition, your taste, and what you're actually producing.
And that gap feels awful. It's incredibly discouraging.
And the source, citing Glass, says this is precisely why a lot of people just quit.
Yeah, that disappointment is just too much to handle day after day.
So what's the way through, according to Glass and the source?
Well, it's deceptively simple, but not easy. The most vital thing, the only way to actually close that gap.
Let me guess. Practice.
More than just practice, it's volume. Doing a lot of work.
Ah, okay. So not necessarily perfect work, just
Yeah.
more work.
Exactly. Glass suggests putting yourself on a deadline. Like finish one story a week or one project, whatever fits your field. Focus on output, on volume.
Not getting bogged down and making each piece perfect at that stage.
Right. Because the argument is that it's the doing, the consistent production, the sheer volume that's the engine that closes the gap.
That's how your actual skill level starts to catch up with your high standards, through sheer repetition and the learning that comes from it.
Yeah. And Glass himself apparently said it took him ages, years even, to figure this out and push through it.
Which brings us back to perseverance, doesn't it?
It really does. The source makes this powerful claim. The difference between those who break through that plateau and those who don't.
Yeah.
It isn't usually some magic spark of talent appearing.
It's what the source calls the often uncomfortable commitment to keep growing.
Growing through that sheer volume of work, even when it feels inadequate.
Right. Which leads us finally to this whole idea of getting unstuck.
Because based on everything we've discussed, the source suggests that feeling stuck, it isn't really about being blocked in some absolute way.
It's more like reaching that tough spot, that plateau, that creative gap.
Exactly. And pausing there to ask yourself a really fundamental question.
Which
Is this really what I'm here for? Is closing this gap, doing the volume of work required, something I'm actually willing to commit to?
Okay. So the plateau isn't a wall. It's more like a crossroads, a decision point.
That's a good way to put it. You're standing at the edge of that gap, feeling the discomfort of your current output not matching your vision.
And you've got two potential paths, depending on your genuine desire and ability to commit to that volume.
Right. Path one.
Mm.
If you look at the discomfort, the sheer amount of work needed, and you realize deep down you don't have the desire or maybe the capacity right now to push through that particular gap.
Then leaving, quitting that specific thing.
That exodus, as the source calls it, isn't necessarily failure. It might just be the process revealing that maybe your energy and commitment are better placed somewhere else.
Okay. But what about path two? If you do feel that pull, if reaching the other side feels worth the struggle.
Then the way forward isn't about finding some magic trick to instantly get unstuck.
It's about that strategic perseverance again.
Exactly. You go back to managing your limited self-control, eliminate the noise, focus intently, work within what you can handle consistently.
Then you just keep going. You generate the volume. You keep showing up.
You commit to the process, however uncomfortable, knowing that volume is the way through.
Okay, so let's try and wrap up the main insights from this deep dive.
Sure. We saw how the source really challenges the talent-first idea, arguing that consistent habit, fueled by managed self-control, is often more important.
Right. Then we looked at those three stages: cognitive, associative, autonomous, how we learn skills.
And how that path isn't smooth, leading often to that difficult plateau, the creative gap.
Where your taste outstrips your current ability, causing that real frustration.
And the surprising, or maybe demanding, solution offered is simply generating a large volume of work. Not necessarily perfect work, but consistent output.
Which then reframes getting unstuck. It's less about a blockage.
And more about facing a tough decision point regarding your commitment to pushing through that specific developmental phase via sheer volume.
It definitely leaves you with something to think about.
Yeah, maybe consider a time you felt really stuck trying to learn something or achieve something important. Looking back now through this lens, was it genuinely a lack of some innate ability holding you back?
Or were you perhaps standing right there at the edge of that creative gap, looking at the sheer volume of uncomfortable work needed to cross it. And maybe, without even phrasing it that way at the time, you were really asking yourself if you were prepared to make that commitment.